and see how maybe we can build upon what we already know. When the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they all gathered together. And one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. "Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest?" And he said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and the first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets." Now while the Pharisees were gathered together, Jesus asked them this question, "What do you think of the Messiah? Whose son is he?" They said to him, "The son of David." He said to them, "How is it then that David by the Spirit calls him Lord, saying, 'The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand, until I put your enemies under your feet'? If David thus calls him Lord, how can he be his son?" No one was able to give him an answer, nor from that day did anyone dare ask him any more questions. A quote from Mark Twain: "Man is the religious animal. He is the only religious animal. He is the only animal that has the true religion, several of them. He is the only animal that loves his neighbor as himself and cuts his throat if his theology isn't straight. He has made a graveyard of the globe in trying his honest best to smooth his brother's path to happiness and to heaven." What we have here is a failure to communicate. Those of you who saw Cool Hand Luke about 89,000 years ago know what I'm talking about here. But what we have is a failure to communicate. For 2 millennia, God sent messengers and prophets trying to tell them who God is and what God is all about, and we did not get the message. And then, 2,000 years later, Jesus comes upon the scene, and he once again tries to communicate to people who God is and what God wants of us and how God created us to be, and people still were not hearing the message. Why is that? Because we get caught up in true religion. True religion. The Pharisees were excited by the fact that they heard that Jesus shut down the Sadducees. Now, the Sadducees were also an elite religious group within the Jewish tradition in the first century. Am I talking too fast? The Pharisees and the Sadducees both are groups of people who had the absolute truth and all the right answers and knew exactly what God's message was to all humanity. Unfortunately, they didn't agree. Isn't it the case? Especially those who claim to have the absolute truth. So Jesus shut down the Sadducees, and now the Pharisees all gathered together. They're thinking, oh, yes, boom, we don't like him, but he got those guys too. So let's put him to the test. Jesus, what is the greatest of the commandment? Now this was a loaded question. As religious fundamentalists and literalists, there are over 600 commandments, 280-something that were good and 300 and something that were bad. In other words, God is more angry than God is nice. And their belief was because God wrote the law and it was all given by God, every commandment was just as important as the other commandment. Does that sound familiar? Fundamentalist religious people today say, the Bible is literally true from the beginning and the end. If you don't believe it literally every word, then you can't believe any of it. See, that sounds great when you're boasting, does it not? Oh, look at the faith of that person. No, really, look at the ignorance of that person. They don't live by that. I promise you they don't. I came from that kind of tradition. You cannot live by every word in the Bible literally. You can't. You cannot. But that's the way it was in the first century as it is now. So Jesus uses the Bible. He uses the words of his tradition. He uses them to make his response. And what he responded with was from Deuteronomy 6. We call it the Shema. The Shema for the Jewish tradition is like John 3:16 for our tradition. You know John 3:16? For God so loved the world, God gave his only begotten. Everybody knows that. Even if you don't go to church, You know that scripture, right? Because it's a part of our Christian kind of foundation. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your mind, and all of your soul. That's the foundation of the Jewish faith. The Orthodox Jews, you see the guys with the little leather boxes on their forehead? The Shema is on a little scroll inside. Mezuzah, it's everybody been to someone's house who has a mezuzah, you know the little thing that you put on the doorpost? Inside of that has Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 6. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your mind and all your soul. Then Jesus quotes from Leviticus 19. Then love your neighbor as yourself. These two hang all the law and all the prophets. What Jesus did in those two statements was completely describe the 10 commandments that Moses handed to the people. The first 4 commandments are about loving God, honoring God, worshiping God only. The last 6 commandments are don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't covet, don't bear false witness. All the things that we do to one another. Love the Lord your God with all your mind, all your heart, and all your soul. Now, he then goes and he uses their testing to test them about their knowledge of the Bible with the whole thing about David. And this is a part I'm going to edit. If you'd like to find out more about this, you can tune in at another time. Call me up, ask me, and we'll go into detail about it. But what we have here is a failure to communicate. What Jesus is saying in this is it's one thing to know the rules, it's one thing to know the scriptures, it's another thing altogether to incorporate these truths into your life and live them. So how do we do it? I want to share with you a quote from C.S. Lewis from Mere Christianity. I thought that this was absolutely brilliant, and I have to share it with you. In about 5 more minutes, we'll be all going home celebrating the fact that we all been enlightened so wonderfully. Do not waste time bothering whether you love your neighbor. Act as if you did. As soon as we do this, we find one of the great secrets. When you are behaving as if you loved someone, you will presently come to love him. If you injure someone you dislike, you will find yourself disliking them even more. If you do him a good turn, you will find yourself disliking him less. Act as if. Now, look around here. It is easy to love everybody here. What we have gathered here are the most lovable people on the planet. And if anyone here disagrees, go ahead and lift your hand up and then see what we do to you, okay? Yeah. But not everybody in the world is as lovable as us, is that right? Do you have a neighbor? Do you have someone you work with? Someone in your family? Someone who may live in your house? A cousin? A nephew? A niece? A brother? A sister? Maybe even your own parents? Someone who may not be so lovable. How do I love them as I love myself? As C.S. Lewis said, act as if. Don't sit around trying to figure out, now, do I love him enough to do something nice for him? Just do it. Because what you find is when you act on your love, that you will, if you dislike them and if you do something kind to them, you will dislike them less rather than more. And you might even come to love them. Have any of you ever met someone first impression and you thought, what a jerk? And then later you marry them? I have many times. Now, sometimes we meet someone and you just think, oh my God. But after we get to know them and we work with them, that you come to appreciate them. And this is what Jesus is talking about. And Jesus put this into action. Love is action. In the last Olympics in Sochi, there was the cross-country ski event, and the Russian skier in his home country had a spill on the cross-country track, and he mangled one of his skis. And so he's trying to finish the race. He wasn't going to win, but he found a way to get back on his feet, and he's trying to ski mostly on one leg, but that mangled ski just kept wrapping itself around, and he falls again, and he falls again. And then the coach from the Canadian team saw him, and the finish line was not far away. And after he fell for about the fourth time, the coach went and took a ski out onto the track. He took the broken ski off of his foot, put the new ski on his foot, and then went off the track so that the man could finish the race. When asked why he did this, he says, "Oh my gosh, it was like seeing a little animal snared in a trap. You couldn't just stand there and do nothing." And he says, "And plus, I wanted him to finish his race in glory." Whether or not that ski coach is a Christian, whether or not he has memorized the scripture, whether or not he has a corner of the truth, I don't know. But what I do know is this, that somewhere in his spirit, in his soul, maybe even in his faith and his religion, I don't know, but somewhere deep within him, he saw another human being in need and saw that his finishing his race in his home country with some sense of dignity and glory was important enough to run out on the track with another ski and change his ski for him so he could do that. That, I think, is a beautiful way to say to us when we see humanity around us who are in trouble in the slightest ways or even the greatest ways and most all the ways in between, to see them as someone who deserves dignity. And we will do all we can to help them to get back on their feet so they can finish their race in this life with glory and dignity. Does that make sense? Am I preaching to the choir today? And this is what I learned from this story from Jesus. And this, I think, is the most important thing. It's easy to get caught up in religion and memorize the rules of the religion and claim to be righteous because you keep all the rules of the religion. But it's another thing altogether for these wonderful revelations from God, written in Scripture, given from the voice of prophets, wherever we are inspired by God's Spirit. It's another thing altogether for them to be written on our heart so that these words, these messages, love God with all your mind, your heart, and your soul, and love your neighbor as yourself, is not something we've memorized and put on our doorpost or in a little box we wear on our head or on a cross we put in our Bible. These words have to be written here. And what Jesus shows us is that love is action. It's not enough to know about what love is. It's we do love. It's like Forrest Gump, remember? When his Gen A was standing at the top of the stairs, and he says, "I might not be a smart man, but I do know what love is." Because he just loved, you see. Love is action. Action. And God requires us to do more than just love those who are lovable, like everyone around you. But God calls us to go beyond. And if you have a hard time thinking, "There's no way I'd do anything nice for that idiot," act as if, you know what? I don't know what's going on in his or her life. I am going to do this simple act of kindness and just let it go. And start seeing how not only will you transform their world, but your world will be transformed as well. I think I did that in 10 minutes. So now let us pray. God, you know each and every heart here. You know those people whom we adore. You know those people whom we struggle with.